and welcome along to our annual HR Trends presentation here at Talentsoft, where today we will be speaking along with 4 HR experts about the future of work and HR trends for 2021. My name is Joe Sweeney. I'll be our host for today, and just want to note, first of all, that I hope everyone is keeping safe and healthy during these unprecedented and strange times. Also want to note that today's video is being recorded in strict accordance with health measures in place currently here in Paris in France. With me in the room today, I have Talentsoft co-founder, Chief Product Officer, author of several books, and speaker Alex Pachilski.
Hello, Joe.
Welcome along, Alex. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Awesome. Before I introduce the other 3 speakers that we have on the video today, who are all joining us remotely on a Zoom call from around Europe, I just wanted to briefly introduce the subject that we will be speaking about today. So we've titled today's discussion, Clarity in Chaos. It's clear to see for all of us in Europe here and around the world that we are living in a kind of chaos today. COVID-19 has changed so much about the way we interact, work, and actually do business. And more we're seeing that these are not temporary changes. They're actually changes that are going to be around for a long time, so we need to figure out how we respond to them. While there is a sense of chaos at times, here at Talentsoft we really believe that this is actually an opportunity for us to reinvent the way we work, to change and rethink the way we do HR, the way we structure our businesses, and the way we work. Many things are uncertain today, but there are certain pillars, which we will be discussing today, that are clear, that there is clarity on. And there will be 4 trends that we will be discussing to frame what we can be clear on today in HR and work. As mentioned earlier, we've brought together HR experts from around Europe to discuss these topics today, like what will work look like in 2021? What are the major shifts happening in HR and the workplace? And how even is management changing, and how should it evolve to respond to these changes? This is what I'll be talking about with Alex and the 3 other guests who I'll introduce to you right now. First of all, joining from the UK, we have Deborah Corey, who is Chief Pay It Forward Officer at Debco HR Limited, with over 20 years experience as an award-winning HR leader and at global organizations, and the author of 3 books. Welcome, Deborah.
Thank you so much for inviting me here today, virtually, of course.
Yes, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, thanks.
Great, and I have to ask Deborah, Chief Pay It Forward Officer, can you explain a little bit what you mean by that title?
Well, it's interesting because when I decided to leave corporate after over 20 years, I wanted a title that was explaining what my focus is, and it really is about paying it forward. So all of the lessons that I've learned over the years, sharing those, and just helping people do more with their organizations and their workforce.
Secondly, we have joining us from Germany, Rabindra Ulla, who is Managing Director at the Trendence Institute for Data-Driven Talent Acquisition. He's also a renowned HR blogger and influencer. Good morning to you, Rabindra.
Good morning, Joe.
How are you in Germany today?
Fine. Obviously, COVID is keeping us all busy, but today is fine.
Great. Well, great to have you here. Thank you for your time. And last but not least, we have joining from the Netherlands, Neely Verlinden, who is Digital Content Manager here at Talentsoft, as well as Editor-in-Chief of AI HR Digital. Thanks so much for joining us, Neely. How are you?
I'm good. Good morning, Joe. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And AI HR Digital, can you just remind us what the AI HR stands for?
Of course, it stands for the Academy to Innovate HR.
Brilliant. Well, that sounds really aligned to exactly what we're going to be discussing today, which is about innovating HR. So we're so excited to have you here. Welcome again to all of you. Great to be able to get into this discussion today around the HR trends for 2021. I think we can get to it straight away. And just to introduce the topic, I wanted to talk about this model that we will be framing the trends around. Essentially, it's the VUCA model, V-U-C-A, and you may have heard of it before. Essentially, it stands for 4 words: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. But Alex, the thing is that these 4 words, they still seem to be very relevant to our world today: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Can you maybe elaborate on that and talk about why we've chosen to choose this model?
Well, actually, 30 years ago, this new model appeared and made totally sense at the time. But obviously, due to the 4th industrial revolution that is quickly going on, due to the COVID situation that we are currently living in, we thought that there could be a twist to this VUCA model, and that actually these letters could mean something else. And that's why we wanted to introduce a new VUCA, a VUCA for virtuality, humility, connections, and authenticity. And that's what we are going to elaborate on.
Perfect. So those are the 4 words that we will be discussing, as Alex said, in these trends for 2021: virtuality, humility, connection, and authenticity, our new VUCA model. Before, Alex, we move on to talking about that first one, virtuality, we're going to show a short extract from the film WALL-E, which will help us to paint a picture of what this is all about.
I haven't all morning, so let's hover over to the driving range and hit a few virtual balls into space.
Nah, we did that yesterday. I don't want to do that.
Well, then what do you want to do?
I don't know. Something.
So Alex, what a great picture of the danger that technology poses to actually take over our lives if we're not careful. Can you maybe expand on that?
Yeah, that was a great Pixar movie. It was 10 years ago. And it's extremely up to date because actually we've been suddenly isolated one from another mid-March for most of the countries. We have known this lockdown, and that was totally unique for you, for me, and for most of us. And it has changed everything. Because from one day to another, we had to continue to keep up with our life, personal life, even if it was extremely complicated, and we had to relearn to live differently. And we had, obviously, to keep up with the business and to continue to work, to continue to collaborate. And what we've done together, we thought that, well, actually, since we got so many digital tools, let's use them to continue doing what we were doing before the lockdown. Except that we have quickly understood it didn't work because what we were used to do, seeing each other, we didn't have to think about why it is so important to see each other live. And suddenly we understood that most of the communication were coming from tells, as they say in poker, things that you don't mention, but that you can see with bodies, with expressions, and we lost all that suddenly. So we wanted to keep up with the large meetings, gathering 15 people. We wanted to keep up with brainstormings and reporting the way we were doing it. And we quickly understood that it didn't work at all because we missed everything that were binding all these elements together. Creating when you don't see the tails, you don't see if someone agrees or not. It's impossible to create, actually. And so we had to reinvent everything. And it took us, I would say, 1 month. And after 1 month, we understood that, okay, maybe we should design meetings differently. We should design reporting differently. Suddenly, managers that were supposed to have become developers, coach for 10 years, 15 years about digital transformation, we mentioned that suddenly it had to be because people felt very bad about this lockdown and they were counting on managers for a real, how are you doing? Like Joey in Friends, you know? How are you doing? Yeah. And it requires empathy. it requires many things that managers were missing. So if we want to avoid the Wall-E situation, we want not to become slave of this current situation, slave of the fact to be isolated, maybe regularly due to sanitary conditions, and we had to reinvent connections, we have to reinvent the way we work together, we have to reinvent the way we create. And so this virtuality thing will be a major challenge for 2021, but probably for the decade to come, because it's not going to stop. And when the fourth digital revolution is going to speed up with AI, virtual reality, and so on, it will be most important than ever. So let's consider, in a way, if we want to see the glass half full, that this is a kind of rehearsal for the decade to come.
Sure. It's definitely brought a lot of those things to the fore and made it a lot faster, things that were already happening, the COVID situation. What I might do is throw to you, Deborah, on this question. In your books, you write a lot about being a rebel and challenging the status quo when it comes to how we treat our people. If we're talking about employee engagement, how does that actually translate to employee engagement in an increasingly virtual world?
Yeah, I mean, what I talk about with this concept of rebel is more of this mindset, and you've spoken about it already. It's about rethinking what we're doing and how we're doing it and why we're doing it, and translating it into a virtual world. So I have a red cape behind me in one of my cupboards, and I always talk about putting on your red cape and being a rebel and being brave and trying new things. And companies have really embraced technology in this virtual world, and I've seen everything and anything out there, from having competitions to having quizzes to having parties to working out, everything and anything. So I do think this rebel mindset is even more important, because we all are getting out of our comfort zones, and we need to be out of our comfort zones, and we need to embrace the chaos, people say, and use this to try different things. If there's ever a time to experiment, it's now, and our employees appreciate everything, even when it doesn't work out.
Yes. And Alex, I think one particular topic that we talk about under virtuality is artificial intelligence. I know you speak a bit about the difference between AI for transformation and AI for automation. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, as I was saying, keeping up with the former practices and trying to turn them digitally doesn't work. So it means that if it applies to AI, it's not about automating what we were doing before. If you take, for instance, the recruiting practices and recruiting processes, it's not about just productivity and allow some recruiters to earn time to do something else. It's about doing things differently, because we will need more diversity, we will need some more profiles, we will go and look for skills that probably are not required today for jobs that still do not exist today. And so it's about transformation, and where AI could become extremely important on the labor market. If we take out all the fears about being replaced and so on, kind of forgetting that we are the ones educating AI, because machines are not going to become intelligent by themselves. It's all about assisting people at work. And interesting in this lockdown situation we are living in, to look at astronauts. They are obviously confined too, in the space, so with all the fears and all the stuff that you could imagine. And there is this AI called Simon, which is a robot, who is following and tracking every moves of the astronauts in space, because astronauts are they are following routines to keep up with a real good mental health. And as soon as AI is detecting something different, a new pattern, then they got to be cautious about this new pattern, and that's what AI kind of warn psychologists and a bunch of people that something is going on here. And so if astronauts, where they are confined, need assistance, we could need assistance because working remotely, it's a new sport. And I believe that in this very case, and there are plenty of domains obviously, AI could be a kind of assistant like, you know, in K2000 with Kit assisting David Hasselhoff. It's really about, is everything okay for you? Should you make a break here? Should you get in touch with this or this someone? And so it would allow, in this very case, not only CEOs to get assistant, but everyone to be assisted. And this is exactly the kind of illustration of a positive AI, an AI that is really designed to support people's activity and help them to breathe and maybe live in a more decent way. And that's why we are going to have to design in this decade, and I really believe it's starting this year in 2021.
Great, really interesting insights. Rabindra, I wanted to throw to you as well, because at Trendence, data-driven talent acquisition is really what you do. What's your view on AI for transformation and how it relates to talent acquisition?
Thank you very much for this very good question. And I want to refer to what Deborah said in this context, because in Germany, at least, HR is a little bit lacking of something which Deborah just called rebel mindset, which is, I think, crucial for this topic. So HR is discussing this topic for 2 to 3 years now, how AI can transform or integrate it in the recruitment process. And it was just very interesting what you said, since it can enhance the process, it can support the recruiters. And at Trendence, we designed a model we called augmented recruiter. These are recruiters who use AI to support the processes, to make better decisions, to help the candidates. But that's not where we are at the moment. I think this is something which will come in 2021. And since we foresee that this will come this year, in the very beginning, we asked the candidates what they think about AI in the recruitment process. And nearly all candidates said that this is a very good idea. They think that the process will get faster, will be more transparent, and they think the decisions will be better in terms of more transparency.
Thanks, Rabindra. So virtuality is our first trend in our HR trends for 2021. Let's look at our next trend, humility, and we're going to start with a song.
Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way. Can't wait to look in the mirror. When I get there, look at each day. To know me is to know.
So, Alexandre, we just heard an extract from the Willie Nelson song, It's Hard to Be Humble. It is hard to be humble sometimes in the workplace. Is that right?
Well, Willie Nelson is so right. Honestly, without exaggerating, it's almost impossible to be humble at work because we've been told that we should impress people. We should hide our fears, our doubts, and some people, I believe, spend 60 to 70% of their energy on a day-to-day basis to kind of hide all that stuff. And so they only got 30% to do their job. So humility, it's a kind of place where you can find back all this energy. And I believe it's possible now to be humble at work because except Willie Nelson, if we look at politicians, for instance, we could say that politicians are not the ones that were the first to admit their mistakes and to say, I don't know. Mm-hmm. We have never listened to a politician say, I don't know. And now it's happening. It's happening because we are facing a pandemic that, yes, pandemic are not a new thing. It was even worse before. But pandemic in this context, in globalization, in the world we are living in 2021, this is new. And it means that the solution that could have been applied yesterday cannot be applied exactly the same way. So you got to invent new solutions to what is not a new problem, but which is a problem in a new context. And so it means that if you do not admit that you don't know, if you do not feel free to say, I don't know, you won't have your 100% of energy. And for sure, to face these unfaced problems, extremely complex problem, we will need our 100% of energy. So I love this stuff. And to come back to what Robindro has said just before talking about AI and about transparency, if transparency is absolutely mandatory to make AI as a real place in the workplace, because otherwise we won't trust AI and we won't be able to make decisions based on AI results that eventually we wouldn't understand. Transparency is key in technology. Transparency is key for human beings because I believe that people from a more societal standpoint, they are fed up to listen to people trying to pretend. So it's all about now, tell the truth. So this is it. This is where we are. Let's find something.
Great. Deborah, I want to ask you a question to follow up on that. In your book, Build It, you include a diagram that shares 10 things that that great leaders do. How does that relate to this concept of humility?
Yeah, it absolutely relates. And it's interesting because we wrote the book, gosh, over 2 years ago. And what we did is we went to our employees who were mostly millennials. And we said, what does a great leader look like? And it's all the things that you're talking about. So the top 10 things are things about being open and honest and communicate, own your mistakes, admit your mistakes, be human, all those types of things that relate into this whole concept of humility. And as you said, it's even more important now. I literally just got off another webinar I did for a bunch of leaders of a global company. And the picture I had on the first slide was of a lighthouse. And I explained that your role as a leader is to be that lighthouse, to be that beacon of light, to help your employees get through this chaos challenge. And the only way that you can do it is by being human. You earn their respect, you earn their trust. I 100% agree with you. So I think it's important for you as an organization to understand what are the 10 great things at your company. So, just because my employees said this, who knows what your employees say, might be slightly different.
Neely, I want to bring you in on this. You're based in the Netherlands. Do you think organizations in the Netherlands are ready to embrace humility at work?
I think it's always tricky to say something about an entire country, even though we Dutch, we are famous for being honest, perhaps sometimes being too honest. I think two things are probably important here. I think the first one is what's the culture inside the organization like? I think that plays a very important role here. Is it acceptable for people, as Deborah just said, to make mistakes? Is it acceptable for people to say, I don't know? So I think that's one thing that's very important. And I think something else that's important here is to take into account the cultural differences. Because between the different cultures, it's not necessarily as common to say, I don't know, and to be open about that. So I think those are two very important things here. To say something about the Netherlands anyway, I do think that in a lot of companies here in the Netherlands, people are not afraid to speak their minds and to indeed say, I simply don't know, or I tried something and it went wrong.
It comes, and you're totally right, Nelly, with the ability to try things. And that's where we come back to HR mechanisms. If you just stick to what we've said and change nothing in the company's governance, depending on cultural matters, mindset, and so on, it could eventually not work. To make it work, you got to change, for instance, objectives management and the way you set objectives. And if during the annual appraisal process, media review. You set objectives and you push incentive for people that will take risk, that will try things, because it's one thing to say I don't know, but in a way, you got to try something, because we cannot stay just with this I don't know. And so if you encourage people to try things, even if they fail, but retry as far as they find a solution, you could really change the game, because it won't be only words. You can force change, because what will be recognized, it's risk. It's not security. It's not pretending. So it's got to come with a change within governance.
Because I agree completely. I think it has to be a change of a mindset, and it can be even something as simple as not calling it a mistake and calling it a learning moment. And I've heard that term before, and I absolutely love it. And I agree with what you said. I've started at my organizations recognizing people for learning moments. So sending them a recognition card saying, well done on trying this. It might not have worked for these 3 reasons, but I'm looking forward to you trying it again and figuring out another way to do it. So I agree, mindset and then action will encourage those changes.
Brilliant. So humility was our second trend for HR in the workplace in 2021. It's a real key. Now we're going to move on to connection, and we're going to, as we always do, start with another clip from popular culture.
What's this?
This is the code that I've written for our year-to-year projections. This is building in all the intelligence that we have to project players.
Okay.
It's about getting things down to one number. Using the stats the way we read them, we'll find value in players that nobody else can see. People are overlooked for a variety of biased reasons and perceived flaws. Age, appearance, personality. Bill James and mathematics cut straight through that. Billy, of the 20,000 notable players for us to consider, I believe that there's a championship team of 25 people that we could afford, because everyone else in baseball undervalues them. Like an island of misfit toys.
So Alex, this third trend around connection is strongly linked to the previous 2. We just saw a clip from the movie Moneyball. Can you explain what that has to do with HR in the workplace in 2021?
Moneyball is a great HR lesson in itself, and in particular for recruiters. In 2 words, what the movie is showing is that the name of the game now, it's not about hiring and gathering people that match with the criteria that are commonly accepted. In the movie, it's 5 criteria that are followed by all the baseball teams in the league. It comes back to the humility point, because if we say, I don't know, and if we've got to find answers will be found together, will require collaboration more than ever. We claimed that for years with the digital transformation, but now is the time, because we won't be able to find solution alone, because no one here in the humankind will have learned a solution, a pre-existing solution somewhere. So solutions have got to be invented, and as once we were saying in a TED, innovations comes from ideas having sex. And ideas have got to come from different angles, different lights, different minds, and that's what the Moneyball movie is all about. It's all about stopping hiring stars, top performers, because they won't have a solution. There will be no individual heroes anymore. It's all about bringing people together that, because of their diversity, because of their differences, when you assemble them together, you got a team. And you got the ground to create new stuff, the stuff that we need today. And if you just take the illustration of this webinar, this is the first time of my life that I'm recording the HR trends this way. We are both of us in a room here in Paris. The other are with Zoom at home. And yet, there is something, there is a ground to communicate. Why? Because we took just the necessary time before to get to know each other. I believe it would have been extremely complicated to start from scratch without knowing who is Deborah, who is Robindro. So we kind of organized this event in a way where eventually, and I hope it's the case for you, which are at home or maybe at the office too, I hope there is emotion. Here, something is going on. I love the way we can jump in on discussion and so on. So what I believe in is that you can still create connections in this digital world. I believe that connections are the only way to create the solutions that we will need in the coming years. And I believe it's, in a way, a good news, because I believe there is no fun in doing things alone anyway. You see that in sports, in art, in your personal life. I see no reason why it would be the case at work, and yet so many people have been used to work alone and to be the hero by themselves, and if they were asking for help, it was almost a weakness. We've got to change this mindset too.
Neely, we're talking about different themes around connection, like getting to know your employees better and actually creating stronger connections with your colleagues. Do you have reflections on that?
Yes, I think complete sense for organizations to create stronger connections with the people that work within them, but also for employees to create stronger connections between them, especially now in these times where so many of us are working alone from our home. I think what becomes more and more important is to feel this sense of connection with your colleagues, as well as with the company that you work for. This is what Alex actually said. It doesn't make sense to do all the work by yourself and to be afraid to ask for help. I think along the same lines, it doesn't make sense to not have a connection, a stronger connection, both with your colleagues and with the organization you work for.
And Robindro, we've already touched on how connection can relate to recruiting, especially in this Moneyball example, but in your experience, how is it changing the ways that organizations are recruiting?
For me, from my point of view, it's also a topic of, for example, culture fit. Yeah, if people are connecting more easily if they have a culture fit, like you just said it, we had a pre-meeting and I think we have a very similar mindset, so we connected easily. And in the way how people recruit, at least in Germany, they are more and more using data-driven tools to measure this cultural fit, to have some kind of cultural basis they can build on the recruitment process. In Germany, we have good examples from NGOs who are already started, because for them, this fit and this connection with the people is crucial for their work.
Deborah, I just want to come to you as well. I believe that you've looked into what's called social connections. Can you tell us a bit more about what that is about and share some examples from companies you've worked with?
Yeah, I recently wrote a blog on social connections, and so I did a little bit of research on it. So the first piece of trivial information I wanted to share with you is from a report that says that social connections are as important to your well-being as eating your vegetables, exercising, and getting enough sleep. And I don't actually think that you'd be surprised by that. If you think about how important those social connections are with your friends, your family, and your colleagues, it really can brighten up your day and help your emotional and mental well-being. So as you said, companies are doing tons of work when it comes to that. I've got a whiteboard, it's too big to put in front of the screen, with Post-its of all the amazing things that companies are doing, because people know that I like to share stories, so they write to me to share stories. And it's just been really, really creative. And what companies are finding is they need to find ways to connect with everyone, not just the type of people who will join in and do an online talent competition or online dance-a-thon or something like that. They're really trying to touch different groups of people. One of my favorite examples is a company told me that they had some employees who are a bit on the OCD parameter. and that during lockdown they had cleaned every single piece of furniture and every ledge in their house, and they were getting a bit bored, so they volunteered to do a cleaning challenge for the rest of their employees. And they came on and they gave these lessons on how to clean, and then they had a competition. And I think it's just a lovely example of bringing people together in different ways. So yeah, really, really important to do this more so than ever before.
Just finally for you, Alex, one thing I was thinking is, what does this change in terms of the way we look at teams in an organization?
Real teams, you mean, not Microsoft Teams? Oh, sorry, this is the kind of joke of 2021 now, I'm sorry for that. What is changing is that we've got to think on a more global level. It means that it's not about now just what I want, what I need. We have talked a lot about the customization of relationships, for instance, between the manager and the employee. Actually, what is changing right now is that you got to put in a way the interest of the team before your own interest. Just talking about the remote work. Some of us want to go remote forever. Some of us want to go back to the office. And if you combine all these ambitions, constraints, wishes, at the end for a manager, for HR, it's impossible to deal with that. What's got to change is that obviously we got to keep up with our wishes and constraints. But we got to put the team interest, I believe, first and say, if I stay at home today, is it a problem for my team or not? Because if it is a problem, there is a very thin line between keeping up with my constraints and becoming selfish. So it's about this balance, and it comes back to education. And what I say is very cultural, because obviously it will be different from one country to another. So if we think collectively, think about the team interest first, and we have a manager that tries to combine the individual constraints, keeping this team objective first, I'm absolutely sure that there is a way where all the problems we are struggling with right now are going to be solved. I believe it's a very important key.
I absolutely agree. And I think that more so than ever, it goes back to that humility and being human, is we need to get to understand the entire person. So what are the different challenges? What are the obstacles that everybody has? You know, before the call, we were all making apologies. Okay, I've got a dog sleeping over there. I've got a cat over here. I've got a husband working upstairs. And I think the more that we collectively, not just leaders in HR, take the time to get to know each other and support each other, I think the better that we'll be able to overcome exactly what you've spoken about. But that change needs to happen.
So connection was a third trend that we see for HR and the workplace in 2021. We're going to move on to our final trend. And as always, we're going to start with a short clip. This trend is authenticity.
Miss Thompson, can I please have a moment?
May I help you, Miss Emily in Paris?
Bonjour. Again, I'm really here to speak to Olivia.
No. If you want her attention, I suggest you post.
Trivia. With macadamia butter and jojoba oil, Duret is smudge-proof. Even when you're very hungry.
So I know not everyone is a huge fan of the Netflix series Emily in Paris, but in that clip we saw her, we saw a bit of a picture of what inauthenticity can look like. She was forced to jump through hoops just to be able to speak to the boss of Duret Cosmetics, forcing her to get on her social media and act the part in order to access that person. So being authentic is really key when it comes to building stronger connections. And Deborah, you kind of gave us a preview in the last one there on what authenticity is all about. So maybe, Alexandre, you can build on that.
Yes, as Deborah said, she has finished the previous trend with this idea that we got to know each other better than that we do today. Not only about the past experiences, not only about the kind of chit-chat we usually practice in companies, but about the real ambitions, the real Joe or the real Deborah I'm talking to, because it wasn't allowed before. When I say before what? Because before the COVID situation, where basically you see your manager in a hoodie at home with his kids, his cat or whatever, things that he were not hiding before, but not talking about before, because at coming at work, as soon as you were in the office, you had to really wear a suit that were different. Mm-hmm. You had to pretend, once again, being strong and all that stuff. And suddenly, because of the first lockdown, we discovered people differently. Mm-hmm. And those people that were really putting a lot of effort to hide their intimacy and personal life, they understood that it was okay. Nothing happened. They didn't become weaker. They didn't even become more vulnerable, just because they were more themselves. And what this Emily in Paris thing is showing is that, yes, Instagram and social media in general, they kind of magnify our life, and everything is wonderful, all the places where we go are wonderful, but the truth is that the more you are doing that, the less you are talking about you, your needs, your fears, your hopes. And this is the ground on which we got to build the next decade and 2021, because it's all about alignment. Being aligned between your personal ambitions and the professional opportunities you will be able to grab. And why this alignment is more important than ever, because all the efforts, all the energy that we are going to have to put to develop new skills, to grab new opportunities, occupy new jobs, and face all the problems we are facing right now, will require, once again, 100% of your energy. And you got to be aligned, and you won't be able to do all this effort if you're not genuinely interested into the opportunities. And to finish with technology, AI will be of no use if you don't tell the truth. AI will say, there is something here for you. There is an opportunity you could grab. And if you have pretending to be someone else, it could be weird. And you could eventually not grab this opportunity just because you pretended to be someone else. Right. So it's alignment between ambitions and opportunities, but also alignment between what technology is going to push for you and what you will be able to grab. So once again, we come back to the transparency thing of Robindro.
Yeah, we are bringing it. It all really relates. All these trends relate back on themselves. Deborah, I just want to come to you. Could you potentially share an example of an organization that has done well in this, in being able to be authentic and allow people to live their own values at work?
Yeah, and I think it's a really good segue, because we were just talking about alignment, and it's so important to align with your culture, as Robindro said, but also with your company values. And actually, right before the pandemic, I wrote a book on bringing your values out to play, which is all about how companies are living their values. But during the pandemic, I decided to interview 24 more companies. And so can I share more than one? Because I don't want to play favorites. I'll do really short and sweet, but they're all just lovely, lovely stories. First one I'll do from the Netherlands, in honor of you, Neely. So Tony's Chocolonely, sure you know that company. And one of their values is makes you smile. And they did some lovely things in making their employees smile. They did things like they sent them gift boxes. And what they did is they got things from local providers to support the local providers and put things in it. They also created something called a Wheel of Wonder, where you could spin it and win prizes for being recognized and appreciated. So that's lovely. Zoom, we're on Zoom. I thought I should pick Zoom. They're in my ebook. One of their values is care for our teammates. And what they did is they had this word called Zoomification or something like that. Zoomitude, that's it, Zoomitude. And it's their word for gratitude. So they held this summer camp for their employees' children. It's called Camp Zoomitude. And 3 days a week, the kids could come online on Zoom and have activities. So it was really living that value of taking care of their teammates. And then the last one I wanted to share, tons of companies, and I'm sure many people have done this themselves, where they didn't just live the values for their employees, but also for the community and their customers, and they went above and beyond. There's so many lovely examples of what companies have done to support the community in need. One of them is a company called Twinkle, and they have this online education system that normally teachers would use. But when they realized that all of a sudden during the first lockdown that parents had to actually teach their children, they lived this value of going above and beyond by absolutely inviting all these new teachers in, letting them have the technology for free, and then spending hours changing the configuration, because as a parent, we don't know how to teach, so we don't know how to look for things. So they made it user-friendly for these new teachers. So again, I think it's really, really important to have that, as you say, alignment with your values, your culture, and how you're actually acting in an authentic way.
Some great examples there. Rabindra, I know that your company focuses as well on employer branding. What does all this mean for how organizations should think about their employer branding?
I think, to be honest, companies will be forced to be authentic in future, since the new generations, they are asking for it, and they are looking at the brands, and they want to see authentic brands in terms of leadership, in terms of what kind of values do they have. And if you're not authentic as an employer, you will end up in this some kind of lookalike contest where all the big brands are, they are all shiny, and from a candidate's perspective, they all look alike. Yeah, they have no differentiation. And actually, we have a good example in Germany, which I saw it first this summer. It was a campaign from Porsche, the car producing company. They are building sports cars, shiny cars. The brand is very shiny, the product brand. And they came up with a campaign called Bad Day. They're showing the employees having a bad day because not all the days are the same and they are not all shiny, which might be your impression when you see the product brand. But the employer, it is an authentic employer, and not every day is a shiny day. You also have bad days.
If I can just add something on what you said, Rabindra, that's a wonderful example, because during the first lockdown, some people tried the weather forecast thing when you give your meteo, your weather, is it shiny, is it cloudy, and most of top management committees, when they were doing that, everyone were doing great, and it was fabulous, and no one were admitting that, wow, this is a crappy day, it's terrible, and it tells a lot about authenticity. So if you want to know if your company is authentic or not, you do that in difficult period, and you will very quickly know
whether your workforce is authentic. Totally. So in speaking about authenticity, I guess it begs the question, is there a limit to how authentic people should be at work? Neely, do you have any thoughts on that?
So for me, in an ideal world, people would be able to go to work as they are. So for me, there shouldn't be a difference in the way people are when they're working from home right now, or the way they are when they step into the office. And I think if there's one good thing that came out of the COVID situation and the fact that so many of us had to work from their homes, is that we've seen people in their personal space. And in a way, it has gotten rid of all kinds of barriers that may have been there before in an office environment. And coming back to what Rabindra said earlier about Porsche and their bad days, I think in an ideal world, if I'm having a bad day, I should be able to tell my manager I'm having a bad day, and perhaps even take the day off without having to take an actual day off for that, if you know what I mean.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Alex? You wanted to...
Yeah, I totally agree with Neely. Actually, it's kind of a matter of education. It means the limits should be the same in our professional or personal life. And it's all about being respectful, being polite, and once again, understanding the interest of a team. When you are going on a dinner on a Saturday night and you are in a bad mood, you are not going to destroy the atmosphere just because you are in a bad mood. You know that this is not a moment, and the moment will be more in a one-to-one with your friend. And that's the same kind of limit. If you think collectively, you know where the limits are basically just thanks to our education.
Well, to conclude, those were our 4 major HR trends for 2021, our HR trends and trends around work and what it will look like in 2021 from us here at Talentsoft and our great experts from all around Europe. Before we finish, before I let you all go, I'd love just to get a sense with one final question of how we sum all of this up. So Deborah, you first. What is one golden tip that you would like to share with our audience?
Well, I'm going to go back to a word that I used earlier, which is to be a rebel. But also, as we've been talking about, it's not just to think like a rebel, but we really need to start picking up the pace and acting like a rebel. I've got a video that I show when I'm trying to make this point. It's of me on a flying trapeze. And it's all about being brave sometimes and letting go, which is what I do in the video. I hold my breath, I let go, and I catch the other person's arms. And that's what we need to do. We need to take a little bit of a risk. We need to try things. I don't think, especially now, our employees expect us to be perfect. Anything that we can do to support them. I've got my red rebel cape there if you want to borrow it, but be brave and be a rebel and go out there and drive change. And
Rabindra, what is the #1 competency for HR professionals in 2021?
Yeah, from my point of view, it's coding. I know we talked a lot about soft topics and humble companies and all that stuff, but I think behind all this, nowadays, there's always tech behind it, there are tools behind it, so understanding coding, learning coding is crucial.
Just one comment on Rabindra's one. I agree with him. The reason why I wrote this my last book, Generation AI, it's really more for people in general and HR in particular to become aware of what behind technology and what can technology offer actually. And it's more a matter of mindset and remove fears.
Neely, can you name one HR practice that you feel should stop straight away?
Yes, for me, that would be performance management done the old way. And by the old way, I mean having a once a year 15 or 20-minute conversation with your manager and that being it. For me, that's something that we should have stopped yesterday, if possible.
I was just going to mention that I had a great interview when I was writing one of my books with Gap, who I used to work for. And they did exactly that. As a matter of fact, they're a case study in the Harvard Business course. And they moved away from the annual to something they call GPS, which is Grow, Perform, Succeed. And it's an ongoing, conversations whenever. It's looking forward and not backwards. And I think that's so important. You're so spot on. If we keep doing once a year with our goals changing every week, it's just not going to work for the employees and it's not going to work for our business.
Great. And finally, coming to you, Alexandre, what is your biggest hope for HR in 2021 and beyond?
My hope would be really about, I strongly believe and genuinely believe about everything we said, 100% of what we've said, but I also believe that if the leaders of this world, and in particular companies leaders, don't change their mindsets and do not agree to take a huge risk, the risk to do differently, the risk to go out of their comfort zone. I believe that change will be more difficult. So my hope would be if everyone could agree to go out of its comfort zone, I believe we would find all the solutions that the world and companies need today.
Brilliant perspectives. I just want to thank all 4 of you for your time and for sharing such great insights today around the future of HR in 2021 and beyond. The fascinating conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Finally, just before we finish, thank you very much for joining us today and watching this video presentation. If you are interested in getting a punchy, summarized version of these 4 HR trends, you can download an ebook that we've prepared. It'll be in the links if you're watching, in the link description if you're watching on YouTube here, or you can also go to the resources section at talentsoft.com. That ebook's going to give you a really punchy, short summary of these 4 trends that we've spoken about today, as well as a bunch more reading that you can go on to do. It's been fantastic having you all here once again, and wish you all the best in 2021 and beyond. We'll see you next time.